Good afternoon, everyone. As Cameron mentioned, I'm Pauline Potter. I like to refer to myself as a specialist in procurement with a passion and a bit of education around sustainability. And I'd like to talk today about the role that procurement specifically can play as a function in helping deliver sustainability ambitions, regardless of geography, sector, industry, as well as highlight the importance of cross-industry and cross-geography learning in this space. There is so much going on and so much good practice that it's really important to kind of come out of the detail and look at what all of the other good things happening around the world are. Very brief overview on Efficio Consulting. We are a global organization of procurement specialists working in a variety of industries, sectors, and geographies. Most relevant to this group here, we do actually a lot of work at the moment with the UK vaccine, PPE, and test and trace supply chain deployments. And really, we are a group of people who are fundamentally passionate about leveraging this core procurement skill set to drive a wide array of business ambitions. And when you think about the ambitions of a business and kind of the traditional role that procurement has played, particularly in the private sector, there's been a traditional role of focusing on objectives like cost reduction and cash flow improvements. It's really about kind of minimizing a single KPI. And one of the most exciting things about this most recent transition over the last really several years in particular is that we're looking to expand the strategic focus that sits within a procurement function from kind of cost and cash through to a wider array of strategic objectives like supply chain risks or growth enablement and a wide array of sustainability. As you mentioned, Cameron, that can mean so many different things, from waste to carbon to diversity and inclusion to labor practices to circular economy to supply localization. And it's so important that procurement are actually quite well positioned within organizations and private and public sector to influence that. One of the reasons that that's true is, the way that organizations and businesses and governments spend their money is sending out a signal as to what they're willing to kind of put their ambitions behind. The procurement sitting as kind of the facilitation between the business and its supply chain is really the, ombudsman of that area. The other point is that a lot of your sustainability comes from the supply chain rather than an organization itself. So, for example, when we think about carbon footprints, if I take the chemicals industry, about 75% is an industry average of their carbon footprint sits within the supply chain rather than in the industry itself. So that's really important for those who are empowered within the procurement function to actively look for opportunities to influence that. And while that's not new, sustainability has been a core focus and something that procurement has been asked to explore for quite some time now. I think the really exciting thing that we are seeing at the moment is that this pace of change is absolutely accelerating. And for my own experience, absolutely over the last 18 months, I've seen a fundamental shift of internal and third-party pressure that are really focusing on how do we face these sustainability challenges head on and move beyond kind of lip service and sort of box ticking to actually making it happen. And I think the critical thing is to reflect in any purchase that a business, organization, government is making, reflecting those requirements. So procurement taking on board changing regulations around plastics or supply localization, having clear expectations in their supplier evaluation and selection process around things like social value or localization or diversity of that supply base. And consumers and customers are increasingly stating that it's non-optional to consider sustainability within a business's strategy. So all of that is bringing together, again, I think that procurement can really play this fundamental engine of change role. So if it's not being leveraged to do so yet, looking at stepping that up. What I see as well is, whilst a lot of businesses and organizations are taking very strong steps forward in this, there's a couple of very common things that I'm seeing as kind of slowing that acceleration. So I want to take a few minutes just to talk through those kind of challenges holding businesses back or perceived challenges. So the first is around sort of senior leadership buy-in. One of the common things that you get as a procurement professional is you're told that, sustainability will cost more. And I think the natural thing that we all need to be prepared to go and defend is one, as in the fantastic examples that Elizabeth and Didier have just highlighted. In the case of effective demand management and improved planning, sustainability and cost can go hand in hand. And second, that there's more commercial opportunity than just cost as well, which is really important where funding is limited or you're seeking investment potential, to be able to demonstrate that there is still commercial benefit, either around market access or margin improvements or just meeting the consumer's needs. The second is around establishing KPIs. This can feel quite daunting if you're new to the sustainability space, but again, the good news is there's actually a wealth of resources out there between the Sustainable Development Goals indicators. The Global Reporting Initiative has literally thousands of available metrics that you can use and apply to your organization, as well as very industry-specific initiatives that you can link back to. Third is around baselining and data collection. Again, I think it can feel quite daunting, but the key is not to eat the elephant in one bite. You want to take, what are my objectives? What information do I need to be able to make decisions in the right direction, and start collecting that internally, mandate it from your suppliers, or leverage third-party resources. 4 is where to get started. I think this perceived risk of not wanting to make the wrong move and then be accused of greenwashing. And I think a key theme here is really about education and training. There's so many facets to sustainability, so many different and fascinating topics, but actually they are quite accessible. And so kind of upskilling your internal organization, your procurement teams, and all of your stakeholders in those key areas is absolutely critical. And then finally, around available supply. And this is particularly applicable, as we discussed today, around developing economies where access and maturity of local supply markets aren't quite there. So when you think about that final challenge specifically, I wanted to talk through a bit of an example. So over the last 10 years especially, we've seen supply chains sort of lengthening and growing increasingly complex. And today's supply chains just are not going to be able to deliver this wide range of sustainability ambitions that globally we have for the future, linked to the Sustainable Development Goals, as well as local business and country ambitions. And localization, I believe, is going to play an increasingly important role for both private and public sector, not only for cost, but also kind of long-term economic sustainability, environmental sustainability, social improvement, and risk management. And procurement have a really significant responsibility in delivering these transformations, again, as the kind of intermediary between supply chain decisions that are being made, what suppliers we're working with, and how we're signaling to the world how we spend our money. So taking a bit of a step away from the focus here, I think that one of the greatest things that we can learn, and I'd like to highlight for the kind of final few minutes, is the opportunity to leverage kind of learning and knowledge sharing across industries for challenges that are common across them all. So in the Middle East and Africa, reshaping in-country supply chains has been a huge, huge focus over the last 5 to 10 years. So something that we do a lot of support and work in is around implementing procurement programs that are specifically enabled around developing what we call local content. So how do we focus on driving procurement decisions that are based around more than just cost or the total value of the business? How do we broaden that definition of value? And that's given us a lot of opportunity to learn from some really great best practice and also some quite common challenges that we're seeing. But we've seen some really fantastic and sort of accelerated progress in this space as well. So there's a lot of learnings that, although it may not be directly related to your sector or to your geography, really we need to take that learning as an area that is particularly advanced in this space. So the key kind of takeaways that we found from that local content development work is first making sure that there is a really clear strategy. Now, that mandate can come from government. So in the case of, for example, Saudi Arabia, there's a very, very explicit requirement about the level of local content they're expecting private and public businesses to incorporate. It's very clear delineation of what we mean by local content. So is it just about labor? Is it about where goods and services are manufactured, their natural resources, but also things like training, capacity building, and the assets they're used in? So establishing that upfront, if there are ambitions to localize, kind of why, in what areas, over what time frame, and then being very clear with whoever is interfacing with that supply chain that that is the expectation. The second is around developing specific structured supplier development programs. So as many on this call will be familiar with today, When there are ambitions to localize supply, often it's not achievable to do that overnight with an existing supply base. So a really important area, as Elizabeth alluded to earlier, is upskilling your procurement and supply chain teams to help develop suppliers. And that can be through existing local suppliers who just need some support in terms of technical training, health and safety, perhaps financial backing, operational efficiency improvements to make them a viable supplier. It could be expanding the market and creating a need for foreign suppliers to come and establish a local presence. But no matter what that is, it's a really, really critical role. And again, looking through the kind of skill set of procurement, that supplier relationship management and performance management can come into a fantastic play here. The third is around developing strategic partnerships. Sustainability is one of the most exciting ways that we've seen a significant level of cross-industry, cross-sector collaboration, and developing those strategic alliances for increasing innovation and de-risking is really important. And then fourth is around measurement and tracking. And obviously, as a procurement focus myself, that's most effectively done for things like localization when you contrast it against your spending. So how do you understand the impact of where the money throughout your supply chain is being positioned? That closes off my section. I think a couple of takeaways to leave with the team here, and looking forward to the Q&A, is that supply chains absolutely need to evolve. That's true globally. That's true across every industry, every sector, every geography. And procurement has the opportunity to play a really fantastic role as an engine for change. So if that's not front of mind for your procurement teams yet, it really should be. The role of procurement is changing. It's important to step up into that strategic remit. I think that's a really exciting area that we should all be looking to upskill and train and look to apply, again, that structured foundation and skill set to a much wider strategic vision of delivering value rather than minimizing costs. Third is, there is some great progress being made, be it on local supply, diversity improvement mandates in the US, this focus on plastic and waste across Europe. It's increased International Labor Organization mandates around what fair labor truly means for businesses. It is so important, no matter what business or industry you're in, to learn from those success stories, and then proactively to collaborate across industries to make sure that you can accelerate any sustainability transformations. That brings me to a conclusion. Thank you very much. I think back to you, Cameron.